And welcome into Pressbox Live. Usually, and I'm Stan the Fan Charles of Pressbox and PressboxOnline.com. Usually, our Wednesday night Zooms are Stan Charles, Gary Stein, and one guest. Tonight, we've got Stan Charles, Gary Stein, Scott Garceau, Bruce Cunningham, and my business partner, John Colton. And the one thing that all five of us have in common is that we all worked at Ravens Radio with one Tom Matte, who passed away a week ago at the age of 82 after a great and glorious life, both on the field and off the field. I'm going to start with you, Mr. Garceau, because I'm guessing you knew him the longest, but I just have, somebody's got something on, a TV or something on, I'm hearing, if you could turn it down. But Mr. Garceau, Scott, great to have you on. Great to have Bruce Cunningham. Let me start with you, Scott. You knew him the longest. What was your first encounter with Tom Matte?
Well, I guess when I got here to Baltimore in 1980, I got to know Tom. I didn't work with him until 82 when we started doing Colt games. And then, if it had Baltimore football on it, I think we did it. We did the Colts and we did the Stars and the UFL and the Stallions and the Ravens. And I think Tom's the only person in the world that has a ring from all of those teams who won championships while he was with them. But my first encounter with Tom wasn't a pleasant one. That was 1965. And it was the day that he became the most talked about quarterback in the National Football League, right? So no Unitas, no Quazzo. Here comes Matte with the wristband. Well, that was the day after Christmas, that game. And that was my Christmas present. My brother and I got a tie box, our last gift, opened it up, and best present in the world, right? 2 tickets to the Packer Colt playoff game. We walk into the stadium and we start moving down following the numbers, and we're astonished. We're near midfield, about 2 rows behind the Colts bench. So 20 years later, when I got to be Tom's friend, I reminded him that I was at that game. I said, as a matter of fact, Matte, I was 14 years old. It was my Christmas present. I think I remember yelling at you, "Sit down, Matte, you're no quarterback." And his line was, "I do remember a pudgy kid yelling something at me." So that might have been our first encounter in 1965, and away we went. But I guess we broadcast together for 35 years, from Turkey Bowls to college games, all those pro teams we mentioned. And it was just a special gift in my life.
I just have to ask, do you remember the price of that ticket? Was it about $3, I'm guessing?
I'm pretty sure, Stan, it might have been a little later than that, but we used to get, like from the goal line or the 10 into the end zone were $4 tickets, out to about the 30, 35 were $5 tickets. And then that prime seat, like probably between the 40s, those were the $7 tickets.
Oh,
this was a playoff game. It might have been $8 for that one. But there's another story with that. Years later, it's 1982. Tom and I are doing Colt preseason games. I said, "You better get out of here. Frank Cush has turned this whole roster over. They had 109 guys in camp." And so Matte says, "I'll meet you. We'll have lunch and watch the afternoon practice." Well, we go to the cafeteria at Goucher, and Zeke Bradkowski's there, who knew Tom well. He actually quarterbacked the Packers in that game. Bart Starr got knocked out in the first series. So we sit down at lunch, and Matte starts right away. Zeke's a quieter guy. Matte starts on him. "Zeke, you know that kick was no good. Where's my money? You guys didn't win that game." Boom, boom, boom. Matte's all over him. And after about 4 minutes of getting peppered, Zeke says, "Tom, all I know is they put 3 on the scoreboard and the check cleared." And Matte starts in again, and they're going back and forth. I haven't said a word. I'm just listening. And finally, I said, "I've had enough of both of you guys." And they stopped like, "Whoa, what's up with him?" I said, "I'm going to tell you something." I said, "My parents didn't have a lot of money. My dad was an underground miner, and they stepped up big time to get me and my brother tickets for that game. And we went to that game expecting to see John Unitas and Bart Starr, and we got stuck with you two." End of conversation.
Hey, Cunningham, Bruce Cunningham of Fox 45. What's your first? Do you remember your first encounter with Tom?
I do. We weren't on the air yet. And, Tom, if you had a promotional thing and you said, "Hey, Tom, can you come by?" Before you got the sentence finished, he was in the car. He was that guy. And I introduced myself and said, we were starting a newscast. And he said, yeah, I've heard about that. And anyway, so I interviewed him for whatever was going on. And then I got back and I saw my boss and I said, "Hey, I ran into Tom Matte." He said, "Did you get a number for him?" I said, "Yeah." He called him. He hired him that day. Tom was one of the first
Great.
employees at Fox 45. He did the Sunday Night Sports Unlimited with me for almost 11 years, I think
Wow.
it was. So Tom really helped us get established around here.
Tom
Really
cashed
did.
a lot of checks in this town.
And I'm
Gary,
going to tell you
gonna
something.
ask-
Let me add one thing to that, Stan. For about 5 of those years, we also had Schmuck and Maddie every Sunday night. So Scott can appreciate this. You better be done working on the show by 9 o'clock when those two get there, because once those two get there, forget it. You're not getting any work done. But man, what fun with those two, you know?
Those two are great. Hey, Gary, I'm going to ask John Colson one, and then you'll take over and ask a couple of everybody.
Gotcha.
John Colson, my business partner. I first met you 1996, I believe it was, when you were the head of Ravens radio sales team. At that time, they were on 1300 AM, and the games were still on 105.7, I believe, if I recall correctly, on the FM. But you got to know Tom a little differently than all of us did. You got to know him in a different way. You want to tell us about that?
Tom, well, first of all, it was on 1300 AM and WLIF.
LIF,
right.
that's right.
If you
Oh,
remember,
yeah.
okay?
Right.
Yep.
So it was pretty crazy. I got to work with Tom, obviously, with you guys in the booth and everything, and helping put all that together. But my relationship with Tom, which his laugh, by the way, was priceless. He would start giggling, and you just
Cackle.
couldn't avoid it. But I got the business end of Tom, and I worked for, it was Infinity Broadcasting, which was a notoriously cheap company, as everybody here knows, just how cheap. So my boss, a guy named Ken Stevens, did not want to deal with Tom and didn't want to deal with, Stan and Bruce and everybody. So he'd give me a number, and that's what you can pay Maddie. And it was always, I would dread these conversations. So I'd call Maddie, and he'd come to my office, and I'd hear him from around the corner going, "God damn it, Colson!" And he would come walking around the corner, and he'd come and he'd close the door and sit in my office, and he would just, "You guys are so cheap. I'm worth more money than this." But you know what? At the end of it, he did it. He laughed. He always showed up, and he always did a great job. But I got the business end of Tom, and I would dread the trip into the office, because he had a way. He could be kind of intimidating when the halfback in him came out, and I didn't always get the promo guy. I got the halfback guy.
But let me just ask you though, John, how much of a big assist was he? You know, we had that 13-year gap of NFL football when the Colts left and the Ravens arrived. And there were a lot of people that weren't that enthused about this team coming here from Cleveland. We stole another franchise. How helpful was Tom in going around loaning credibility and a certain NFL panache to the whole thing?
Yeah, he did add credibility. Well, I think actually, because it was the NFL, it had a lot more credibility than the Stallions and the Stars and things like that.
Yep.
So the NFL carried its credibility. What Tom did was he opened doors, and he gave our treatment of the NFL credibility. He didn't give the Ravens credibility. He gave the radio broadcast credibility, because remember what we were up against at the time. First of all, the Orioles were in the ALCS, and they were going to the playoffs, and Cal Ripken and people like that were peaking, and John Miller was the broadcaster. So we had to walk in, and Tom definitely, and I might add, by the way, that Scott and Bruce also added a lot of credibility at that.
No question about that.
Bruce had been a mainstay on Fox 45, and Scott had been on ABC2 or WMAR at the time for a number of years. So putting those three guys together doing it allowed us to go out and talk to sponsors, and it would have been a nightmare if they had just hired unknown entities to do this.
John, I want to test your memory. Do you remember this one? It had to be 96 or 97. We're at Memorial Stadium, and they used to pump the broadcast into the concourse level. And we're probably an hour and a half before kickoff. And I think we're doing a run through or recording something. And suddenly John comes charging into the booth, charging in with a fearsome look on his face, saying, "You guys, you're on the air." So whatever Maddie was talking about, hopefully it wasn't too bad this time, was going throughout the whole stadium into all the restrooms.
He was talking.
And
I
I
do
think
remember-
John thought our broadcast career was over.
Oh,
Well,
that's
he-
good.
He was.
You know,
he was-
there were three of us in the booth, and that can get crowded. So
And he
Scott
was
had a
talking-
rule. Scott had a rule. If you had something to say, you had to raise your hand. And I can remember so many times at intense parts of the games looking over at Matty, and he's like, oh, you know, like that kid in the third grade. Scott also had a rule based on Matty, no drinks on the counter.
Yeah, that was
Wow.
over. I think that ended after the USFL season. He was getting kind of aggressive.
Well-
And they reeled him in and said, hey, maybe after the game, but not during the game.
Well, there was one that where the big boss was in our skybox, and it was a preseason game, and it was incredibly boring. And we're listening to the you know, it's in the fourth quarter, everybody's leaving, and my boss Ken Stevens goes, I know that sound. Get me to the radio booth. And he grabbed me, and we had to go through the halls in the back of M&T Bank Stadium at the time, PSI Net Stadium. And we had to go through the back and down around into the booth. The sound he recognized was ice clinking in a glass. So Tom hadn't completely.
I remember
given up at that point. And he recognized
Wow.
it, by the way, because he had to admonish Sonny Jurgensen in DC for the
In
exact
DC
same
for
thing.
doing the
Same
same thing. Yeah. Gary, I said I'd turn it over to you to ask some questions, but
That's
I
all
want
right.
I want you to have the ability to tell a fond remembrance of Tom as
Well-
well, and then you can take over for a few.
Well, so the first time I met Tom actually had nothing to do with Ravens radio. I had just moved to Baltimore in '87, and I started at Towson University, you know, in the mass comm program, and calling football games and basketball games. So I don't know if Tom. So this was '88 actually. I don't know if Tom was calling Towson games or not at that time. I'm not even sure, to tell you the truth. I know that the Colts weren't in town anymore, so maybe he was doing that. I have no idea. But anyway, he was up in the box, up in the press box at Minigan Stadium, and you know, like I'm young. I'm in my 20s. Like I'm just starting my career. This is what 36 years ago, 35 years ago, and there's Tom Matty. Okay, and I had never met Tom Matty before, and I was like a little kid because my brother was a big football fan, and he was the one who got me into football, and he was a big Tom Matty football fan. So I introduced myself to Tom Matty. I was stuttering through the whole thing. I was sheepish going over to him. I told him I was doing Towson University football as a student. So, you know, and he had these huge hands, right? And he grabs me by the shoulder and he says, Gary, young man, you just keep at it and you keep doing it, and maybe one day you'll make it to the NFL. And, you know, sure enough, it was 10 or 15 years later or whatever it was. And there I was working with Tom. And the thing that I always remembered about Tom is his popularity never waned. And what I mean by that is this. I worked with him and Bruce Laird on Monday Night Madness for 5 years, basically from 01 to 06. We were at Bill Bateman's restaurant. We were in Towson. We were in Reisterstown, a couple of different locations, etc. We had Ravens players come around. The Ravens would help us get players. Brian Billick would come. No matter who came from the Ravens, no matter what player came, they could have been a star in the game the previous night. The line for Tom Matty's autograph was always longer than the autograph line for the player. And I could never understand that. And I said to Tom, I said, one day, Tom, doesn't everybody in town have your
Have your
autograph by now? He goes, I don't know. I can't explain it. I've been fooling him for 32 years. It was crazy. But anyway, Scott, I wanted to ask you, you had mentioned the Super Bowl III story when the Colts played the Jets,
Yes.
1969.
So I went back and I looked at the play about 12 times last night. I had the full broadcast. So Tom has the 57-yard run. I think he still holds the Super Bowl record for most yards average per carry.
I think so.
Super Bowl. I think it was 10 or 11 carries with the 57-yard run. But on the 57-yard run, if you see that play, Tom gets tackled down around the 15, and he gets up and he goes after Johnny Sample in a hurry because Tom was stepped on after he was tackled. It was a cheap shot. He thought it was Johnny Sample, his former teammate with the Colts. He goes after Sample, He found out about 12 years ago, watching a clip, that it wasn't sample. I went back and looked at it last night. I forget, it was defensive lineman number 80 who actually stepped on him and cheap shotted him. He left the game at that point because I think he was shaken up. He said he was black and blue down in the groin area for about a month and a half. But anyway, it was a cheap shot. The twist to the story is 1985, Tom and I are doing USFL game.
Uh-oh.
I'm in the press box, and I'm talking to Cal LaFleur, who started the replay thing. He came up with this rule where each coach could challenge 2 calls on TV games where they had video by throwing a flag. So anyway, I'm talking to Cal. Tom walks up. I said, Cal, you know Tom Matte? He said, know him. I think about him every morning when I put in my partial. And we both kind of looked. Cal LaFleur was the referee. He was a linesman in Super Bowl III. When Matte went after sample, Cal stepped in to separate the two. Matte's mouth guard, or his face mask, went into Cal's mouth, knocked out 3 teeth. He wears a partial, and he said, I think about Tom every morning when I put my partial in. And Tom didn't realize it. And Cal said, no, it was accidental. I know you didn't try it, but there's another twist to the Matte story in Super Bowl III. And Matte, Bruce, and you guys have probably heard this 20 times. Matte always used to say, you know what? If my teammates didn't let me down, I would have been the MVP of that game. Tongue in cheek, obviously. But he had a great game.
That's funny.
You know what? I looked at that last night, and we remember Namath winning, and he wasn't great, but the Jets ran the ball. The Colts had 5 turnovers. They had 4 interceptions, and they lost a fumble in that game. And that's pretty good defense when you turn the ball over 5 times and only give up 16 points.
So
Bruce,
go ahead. I'm sorry, Gary. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, Bruce, you know, one of the things as I was researching Tom a little bit, and he talked about this a lot too, you know, he didn't start for the first 5 or 6 years of his career.
Right.
You know, Lenny Moore, who was still in the prime of his career, Hall of Famer, was in front of him. And Tom, you know, Tom wanted to play. So my point, and I've talked to Tom about this, I know that you have too, you know, he had 9,000 all-purpose yards in his career, but he said, I could have doubled that if it wasn't for Lenny Moore.
You know, Tom, we all love Tom very much, but and Scott will back me up on this. Tom could hold a grudge. Tom could hold a grudge for a long time. And he, up until the last time I talked to him, he was still mad at Lenny because Lenny would come out of every game and, you know, oh, this hurts or that hurts. And then he'd be out all week and Matte would have to take all the snaps. And then sure enough, game time.
Magically.
Hey, a miracle happened. And Matte was angry about that for a long time.
Bruce, you know what Tom used to say all the time? I hate Lenny Moore. He used to say that about his mother too, and I'll tell that story. But he says, I hate Lenny Moore. He goes, he's got more talent in that finger than I have in my whole body. You know, Lenny was such a great player. On his mother, Tom was the 7th pick of the first round for the Colts. And I think his package was $6,500. And he'd scream, I hate my mother. He'd hear about a contract go, she had me 30 years too early.
You know, it's funny. I remember when the Ravens hired John Harbaugh, one of the big things was he would talk about how he goes, I dated his mother.
Yes.
He dated Mrs. Harbaugh.
As we tell all these
That's
stories,
right, Jackie.
it's like 6 degrees of Matte, you know? It's amazing how long those tentacles were, you know?
So either the first go ahead.
Didn't he also date Art Modell's? Didn't he date Pat Modell as well?
I'm not sure.
I think
I
so,
don't
but I'm
know.
not sure.
So we're flying to Indy first or second year to play the Colts. And Tom's telling me the story about Mrs. Harbaugh, that, you know, her and Judy were cheerleaders and I dated them both and back and forth. And I'm okay. I've heard a lot of Matte's stories. So we get there, and I think I had to do a live shot down on the field, had Tom with me for Channel 2. It's pregame warmups. All of a sudden, Jim Harbaugh, who's the quarterback of the Colts at that time, runs over to us, full gear, stops in front of Tom and says, Mr. Matte, Jim Harbaugh, I just wanted to stop and say hello. My mother's told me so many good things about you. And he ran away, and I go, I guess you're right this time, Tom.
You know, the last conversation I actually had with Tom, because I haven't kept up with him that much over the last couple of years, was pre-COVID. It was in 2000. It was the 2019 season, and he brought up a really good point. he said, because he loved being a Baltimore Colt, and we can talk about that. I mean, that was Tom Matty, perfect person for this town, perfect team. He said, the Colts were here from 53 to 83. They've actually been in Indianapolis longer than they were in Baltimore.
Yeah.
And I hadn't even thought about that.
Yeah.
And that was the last, that was a really poignant moment, actually, because that's amazing to think that team that had so much history in this town has actually been away longer than they were here.
Yeah. I was thinking about his run at Ohio State. So he's 7th in the Heisman Trophy voting his senior year, which I didn't realize. And his numbers, don't look like Heisman numbers, but it was a different game, 3 yards in a cloud of dust. So his head coach was Woody Hayes, a legend in the college game. His offensive coach was Bo Schembechler. Then he comes to Baltimore, Hall of Fame coach Weeb Eubank, followed by Hall of Fame coach Don Shula. So he had some pretty good coaches around him. But his Ohio State run, Tom's senior year, Ohio State won the NCAA basketball championship. Jerry Lucas was a two-time college basketball player of the year. John Havlicek was on that team. Larry Siegfried, who had a good run with the Celtics, was on that team. And a guy that came off the bench and was a little bit of a contributor was named Bob Knight. He was on that team. Tom's rooming with Jack Nicklaus. Man,
oh my God,
pretty good time to be a Buckeye. He was very proud of his Ohio State run.
Well, he just missed Frank Howard by a couple of years. They almost overlapped.
Right.
He was at Ohio State as well, played baseball and basketball. So there's that. But Matty used to love to tell the story. The end of practice is when they would practice the pass plays at Ohio State. And Woody Hayes hated to throw the ball. That's why. It would always be the last couple of plays. And Tom threw an interception or threw a bad pass or whatever. And Woody was known for hitting himself when he'd get upset. And he hit himself so hard that he knocked himself out.
I know
he's laying there on the practice field and everybody's down looking at him. And Matty says to the coordinator, says to Schembechler, he says, well, what should I do? And Schembechler says, son, if I was you, I'd start running right now.
And he did. He went to the locker room, changed, and got out of there.
John,
had
I
to
know
deal with Woody the next day. Yeah.
John, I know you wanted to say something before, just a moment ago.
I said it. It was just about Tom's dating past.
I've got a good one there too. We're on a charter, a Ravens charter, and Tom and I either sat next to each other with a seat open or across the aisle from each other. And I think we're across the aisle, and I noticed the flight attendant is down on one knee talking to Tom for extended time. Maybe it was 10 minutes, but it was much more than a hello, how do you do? And she walks away, and Tom turns over to me, said, man. He said, what happened to her? He said, she was a knockout. She used to be on our Colt charters back in the day. I said, shut up, Matty. I said, she just walked up front and said to the other flight attendants, what the hell happened to him? He used to play for the Colts. He was a good looking guy. He dropped an expletive on me and laughed.
Hey,
Scott brought out the best or Tom brought out the best in Scott on airplanes. I have so many Tom and Scott airplane stories. I think my favorite, the flight attendant was coming by with a cart with the drinks. And Tom was sitting next to the window, and Garceau was on the aisle, and the flight attendant didn't ask Matty what he wanted. So Garceau, she passed me by. You got to tell her I need a drink and a bottle of water. And Garceau didn't even hesitate. He says, Miss, could you give my dad a bottle of water?
Hey, I'm wondering the two of you, Bruce and Scott, when the Colts left town, obviously it was a killer for fans. But for the ex-Colts, it was really a killer. How excited was Tom when the CFL first came to town? Because it kind of got him back in the game and got him back active in broadcast.
He was very excited. And I'm happy to tell you that it happened right here at Fox 45. We had Jim Spiros on the Sunday show. And Tom was there as usual. And he and Spiros start talking. And Spiros says, well, why don't you come in on us with this deal? He said, what, really? And so, yeah, Matty was absolutely thrilled. He just loved football. And the interesting thing about Matty and the Stallions is that he did the paint deal at Memorial Stadium. So anybody in the world that's got a Memorial Stadium seat, it's got Tom Matty's paint on it. How about that?
That's right. That's right. He worked out the deal to get the inside of the stadium painted as well. It refurbished that stadium. Scott, your remembrances of that when we got football back? It wasn't quite the NFL yet.
Yeah, Tom and even Judy were involved. Remember, they were trying to sell tickets. We had that exhibition game with the Dolphins and the Saints.
Saints,
Tom and I broadcast that even, but he was so involved from the state legislature, even going to Annapolis to talk about getting football back, and he was doing everything he could. Bottom line is, he loved being a Baltimore Colt, but he came here in '61 and never left. He loved Baltimore. He loved Baltimore. Never forgot where he came from. A bunch of his high school friends probably came out over 20 years. Judy and Tom would open up their house. They'd stay there and they'd go to the Preakness every year. I mean, that was Tom. He was about Baltimore. He always said, man, I wish I had lacrosse when I was young. I think I could have been good at that. He loved lacrosse.
Yeah. Well, Scott, he was a hockey player as a kid, wasn't he?
Yeah, his dad was a professional hockey player. Tom was born in Pittsburgh. His dad was playing there, and then his dad played for the Cleveland Barons. That's why he went to high school in Ohio at Cleveland Shaw High School on the east side. And, obviously he was in the crosshairs for Ohio State. Tom said, Joe Russo, a good friend of Tom's that I've known for a long time, Tom always said Joe was a better back than me, but he said he hurt his back later, and that was kind of my opening. I don't think Tom started till his junior year in high school, where a lot of NFL stars they're playing as freshmen and certainly by sophomores. But he was a little late to the party, but he took off.
Well, Tom's dad, he played. That was back during the days of the original six. Tom's dad played 17 years of minor league hockey. Can you imagine?
He got a cup of coffee. He got a few games in the NHL, I think. But Tom tells a story. He wasn't supposed to go out for football. His dad didn't. His dad spoke mostly French. He was a French Canadian. He didn't want Tom playing football, and Tom, I guess through mom, somehow went out for football. He said his dad didn't talk to him for like a week and a half. He wouldn't talk to him. And either the first or second game Tom played, he blew out his knee, a major ACL injury. And his dad was really upset then, but in the end, it worked out pretty good.
Isn't it ironic that the one Super Bowl team that he was on, that won the Super Bowl, he only played a couple games that year because he got hurt early in the season?
Yeah.
Well, how many running backs last 12 years in the NFL? And that's what Tom did, 12 years. And that's crazy. I looked either 7 or 8 years, he played all 14 games. And Tom, we just talked about this. I had a good visit with him. I had a bad one when he was really failing in the end, but I had a good one where we talked for 2 hours and he laughed. He'd been home from the hospital then. But we got into some of that stuff about, why at that time, why do things work the way they do? But as you said, he had Lenny in front of him, but Lenny was such a stud. He could play flanker, he could play running back, he could return kicks. So there was room for more than just Lenny Moore, because you could put him as a wide receiver, put Tom in the backfield with Boulash or whoever was back there, Tom Nowatzki for a lot of years. Special team.
Also I was looking at the stats. There were years, guys, where his average reception out of the backfield was like 15 or 16 yards. Yeah. I mean, this wasn't like a 5 or 6 yard dump off. He made yards.
That was the thing. That's the thing he remembered as an analyst. He would always talk about finding the dead spot in the zone. Yeah. And that was something that he knew how to do as a player.
Take what they give you. He used to always say that too. Tom.
Yeah.
Tom. You can only set your watch on him.
He was talking that day we had the good visit. He said my career probably would have been 2 to 3 years shorter, but John wouldn't allow them to let me go because he trusted me. He trusted him out of the backfield on that 3rd and 6 that Matty would find the dead. He called it the option pass. He'd come out of the backfield. The linebacker would pick him up, and Tom had the option of going inside or outside, whichever side he thought he could beat him. And he and John had that down. They just kept moving the chains. But you're right, Gary. I looked at his average per catch, and it's a lot more than backs average these days. He was catching the ball downfield and making some pretty big plays in the pass game.
He was really a tremendous friend of Unitas's, wasn't he, Scott?
Oh yeah, they had a lifetime together. Tell a story. They're playing racquetball, and John is up front. I guess Tom hits a shot, and John goes down and says, "What are you doing?" And Tom says, "What do you mean? What am I doing? I just hit the ball." Tom had thrown the racket at really. Achilles injury, that sometimes was a career end, not just a season ender. So he's in one bed. I think Tom goes home, and later that day, his bleeding ulcers almost explode and he loses all kinds of blood. They have to rush him to the emergency room. Unitas and Matty are about 3 beds apart in the emergency room.
All from a game of racquetball.
Yeah,
All from a
yeah.
game of racquetball. How about what kind of guy, John? What kind of broadcaster was Tom?
Well, that's the coolest thing about what Tom did when the Ravens came to town, and we talked about, obviously he had been the Colts, and there was a lot of anxiety about a new team, and it's not the Colts and the whole bit. He embraced the number of the players, it seemed like to me. And by the way, from my perspective, and I think Scott and Bruce would agree with this, he loved Ray Lewis. I mean, he just thought Ray Lewis was an incredible, and he made friends with some of those players, some of the very young players, and would tell them stories and so forth. But what that allowed him to do is genuinely embrace the team as a broadcaster. So he would tell stories about these people. He would talk about them. And I think it made these fans that people weren't all, some people swore they would never go to a Ravens game.
Yeah.
And Tom would talk to him because we'd be out at events. And now I'm never going to one of those damn Ravens games. And he'd start talking about football and the personalities of the kids. Like he knew Michael Jackson very well, and he would talk about these kids, and he would endear people to the team. And I think that he was like a one-man band when it came to getting some of these, especially the old timers, to buy into the fact that it wasn't bad having the Ravens.
I think Kevin Burns saw that in Tom early too. I think when they were first moving the team, they said, who's still in town, who's around, who can help us? And I think they settled on Matty very early. And for an obvious reason, he knew everybody in town. He was so outgoing, everybody loved him.
Yeah.
They were smart to let him help spearhead that outreach to the old Colts. They really were.
Yeah.
I think a lot of the younger people were on board, but the older people, Tom's age, my age, it was like they don't have horseshoes on their helmets.
Right.
I'm not sure that's my team. And I don't think it really flipped until 2000. I think some of them were coming over, but they exploded in 2000 with that Super Bowl ride that came out of nowhere. And you're looking at the Beltway and everybody's got a Ravens flag on their car. And I think some of those older people then thought, you know what, if Tom Matty's there and Johnny U's standing down on the sidelines and Lenny Moore's kind of around the team a lot, maybe I can cheer for this team. So I think that was big, but Tom, you're right. Tom had a lot to do with it.
I agree with you on 2000, but there was another milestone just before that. In 98, the first year of the new stadium, remember the Colts came in.
Yeah.
And when the Colts were on the field there at PSI Net Stadium, as it was called, the boos came down. And I think a lot of people were able to purge their systems that day. And then, as Scott said, the Super Bowl cemented it. But I think those two things were the major milestones. I really
Bruce,
do.
was that the same day that Jim Harbaugh handed Johnny Unitas the game ball?
Yes. Well, I don't know. Jim
I thought
Harbaugh
it was the Colt game.
then.
I thought it was the Colt game.
No, it was
but
Jim
it might have been
Harbaugh.
the
He
Colt
ran
game.
over and handed John the game ball. Yep.
It was on the cover of the Baltimore Sun because I got Johnny U to autograph it. It's in my den. I love that story. It was a great story.
Yeah, that was Peyton Manning's rookie year.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Scott, we've got about 5 minutes. I'm going to ask everybody to tell one story. But before I do that, I wanted to ask you, you probably knew Tom better than any of us because you really had some length and longevity. He was an amazing sort of entrepreneur. I use the term, he cashed a lot of checks. He had more stuff going on all the time. Were you kind of mesmerized by that about him?
Yeah, a little bit, because you're right. He worked at the port for a while. He did circuit boards out in Hunt Valley for
The
years.
racquetball club.
The thing with Tom was he was always telling us he was just one more thing. If that goes, I'm on easy street. I'm done. I'm going to be, I'm not going to be a millionaire. I'm going to be a
gazillionaire.
And I don't think that thing ever came. So he was a working guy. Certainly he didn't have a lazy bone in his body from broadcasting and all the other things he did. And you know what? He never didn't pick up the phone when somebody said, hey, can you show up at the Cub Scouts a week from Tuesday? Tom Matty was there, from Colt Corrals to Raven Roosts and Raven Nests. if you called Tom Matte, he was there with a smile on his face, lighting up a room. So I think that's one of the things I'll always remember. He never met a room he couldn't light up. And I'll tell this one quick because some of you guys were there. We had this kind of tradition on Raven road trips where we'd always have a nice Saturday night dinner, usually at a steakhouse or something in the opposing city. Well, it became a custom that late in the dinner proceedings that I'd get tapped by somebody like Bruce or John or Stoff or whoever would be there, Kevin Burns, say, I think it's time. And I would get up and get the attention of the room and say, ladies and gentlemen, can I have your attention, please? And all of a sudden the room would get quiet and I'd point to Tom and say, ladies and gentlemen, near Hall of Famer, Tom Matte. And he would act like he was agitated. But for the next 15 or 20 minutes, he'd have new best friends, trying on his Super Bowl ring, telling stories, and everybody'd be happy. And that's Tom Matte in a nutshell.
I remember a trip to Indianapolis in '97, and we're coming downstairs. I think it was a Saturday night before the game, and there's a wedding going on in the hotel lobby. And they're all Colts fans, and it was kind of informal. So some of them had Colts gear on, and I'm guessing some of them were from Baltimore because a couple of them recognized him and said, hey, Tom Matte. Tom Matte walked over there and worked that wedding for about a half hour. He shook every hand. He posed for pictures with everybody, including the bride, put a little kiss on the. I've never seen anything like it before or since.
John, you got one story that you're really fond of with Matte?
I can't tell it.
That's the problem with Matte.
That's the problem.
I'll just say it was in the Meadowlands, and we were all staying at the Meadowlands before a Ravens Jets game, and it might have been the Giants, but we were staying there, and it was like 1:30 in the morning with a bunch of clients, and things were winding up, and everybody had a few drinks, and down this long hallway, you see these four shadows walking down the hallway, sort of bumping from one side of the hallway to the other, running, and it's Matte and three other former professional athletes from various teams that he had run into in Manhattan, and they had gotten into the sauce pretty good. And I'll just leave it by saying they entertained our clients until about 3 a.m.
That's good.
I got one. This is a classic Matte. He's doing the Fiesta Bowl with Lindsey Nelson for CBS. Tom tells the story that he goes down for dinner and orders a pitcher of margaritas. Why not, right? We're in Arizona. Sounds like a good drink. Well, Lindsey gets to the table and Tom finds out Lindsey doesn't drink. So guess who had a pitcher of margaritas and maybe one or two after. Now he leaves the restaurant. They're staying at a resort. It's not hotel-like. It's more like spread out cabins, bungalows, whatever you want to call them. And Tom said he felt fine, but when he stood up, his legs were jello. And now he's looking for his room, and they all look alike, and it's dark, and he sees a small little short wall that he figures maybe it's that way. And he jumps over the wall and jumps directly into a cactus. They have to get the Penn State trainer up to take care of Matte. It's about 11 o'clock at night now.
Right.
The trainer tends to Matte, I guess, pulls all the cactus out of him, and he shows up and does the game. I think it's Christmas Day. The Fiesta Bowl was Penn State and somebody.
Wow.
Just another day in the life.
Gary, you got one?
I don't have anything to top that, but I will tell you this. I used to kid him. I used to say, when we were on break on that Monday Night Madness show, I said, Tom, you do realize that your nickname as an NFL player was the garbage can, right? You do, you do realize that. He goes, let me tell you something. And this was after he had already had a few pops. Let me tell you something. I fooled him for 12 years, right? Up, down, zigzag, in, out. I'm still cashing those checks. They can call me whatever the hell they want to call me.
I'll just say I've been in broadcasting in one way or another for close to 40 years. I never consistently laughed as much as when I did the Monday Night Madness show with Tom. I'll never forget during commercial breaks, because Scott, echoing what you said, he was always one thing away from being a gazillionaire. We would take commercial breaks, and I'd lean over and I'd dial his number, and every time he would answer, Tom Matte, and I would hang up on him. But he would always pick up the phone. Gary, you pronounce his name correctly. I used to have so much fun every time we played the Steelers those first few years they had that running back, the Samoan something Fatamala.
Yeah.
Chris Fuamatu Afala.
I always used
He
to
never
ask
got it
Maddie.
right.
I didn't
I
get
do-
paid extra for pronouncing that either.
I used to always ask Maddie before those games. I go, Tom, well, how do you pronounce this guy's name?
Chris, he would go
He's
Chris.
Chris. I
That's
said,
right.
"You go,
That's
Chris."
right.
Yeah.
Hey, I appreciate each and every one of you taking some time out. He's a special guy in our community. He had longevity. He wasn't the star that Brooks was, or Johnny Yu was, or Frank, or Eddie Murray, or Cal Ripken. But boy, he was as beloved as anybody in this town. And I think all five of us are going to miss him.
Well put, Stan.
Absolutely.
All right.
Very well put.
Who's going to
You
win
know,
the
you-
Raven? Who's going to win the Raven game tonight?
Ravens. I
Tom,
don't know how
Tom
close
Maddie.
it's going to be, but it's going to be Ravens. But let me just say one more thing about Tom. You couldn't be within 5 feet of him and not smile.
Yep.
How many people in your life can you say that about?
That's a
Yep.
great point.
Absolutely.
Great
And
point.
as Scott Garceau said, somehow he packed 150 years worth of living into 82.
That's it.
Sure did.
Yeah.
He sure did. Guys,
You know what,
thank
Tom
you.
and Judy have been married for 59 years, and next year will be Tom's 50th wedding anniversary.
Wow. I know.
And she taught him everything he needed to know about film, watching
Yeah,
film.
she did. She studied film with him. Yeah.
That's
Hey,
right.
guys,
She'd have the free safety. Yep.
we've all been friends for a long time, and it was great to get together and reminisce a little bit about somebody we love so much.
He's looking down laughing at us. Yep.
I'll
Now,
talk
hey,
to
let's
you.
get this group together on a happier note sometime.
All right, sounds good. I'll talk to you all soon.
All right, Stan. Thanks for having us.
All
Bye,
right.
guys.